My name's Ian. I'm part of Nicole's facilitation team. I'm sure you've heard at least one other of my colleagues explain our roles, so I won't overdo it. Suffice it to say, I'll be here to help take some notes and create the space for everyone to share their perspective on the proposals and the solutions and the evaluation that Waterfront Toronto has done. Just so you're 100% sure you're in the right place, this is a complete communities room. We'll be focusing in on the evaluation, the solutions that focus on affordable housing, public realm, and social inclusion. So those are the subtopics that we'll be going into a bit more detail in this room. You would have been in another room with a different colored piece of paper on your table at least once. This is the purple one. If you want to write anything down about the complete community solutions, just please make sure you give it to me or the facilitator or note taker at your table before you leave. I don't have anything else to say on process that you haven't heard at least twice already, so I will just turn it over to Chris Glashik and Leslie Gash from Waterfront Toronto. They're going to walk you through the solutions. My one request would be that you don't interrupt them while they're presenting. They're only speaking for about 12 or 13 minutes, and then the rest of the time is to hear from you, and you can get your questions answered at the table. So I'll turn it over to them.
Thanks, Ian. Welcome, everybody. My name is Chris Glashik. I'm the Chief Planning and Design Officer at Waterfront Toronto, and I'm joined by Leslie Gash, who is our Senior Vice President for Development. And we are going to talk about complete communities, which many of you may know are communities where you try to include all the different facets of a community in one neighborhood. So trying to move away from a model where we have residential areas over here, commercial areas over there, shopping areas over there, to where all those things cohabitate together and constructively in one neighborhood. And this is something Waterfront Toronto has been advocating for and pursuing really since it was started over 15 years ago. We have actually delivered many of the components of complete communities in that time. So we have already added about 600 affordable rental housing units to the waterfront that are operated by local nonprofit housing groups in Toronto. We've built about 43 acres of parks and public open space, including 26 kilometers of public linear parks and trails. And we have also been building community facilities such as daycares and recreation centers, and we now have a recreation center under construction in the East Bayfront right next to the Parliament Slip. So part of what we have been trying to achieve with the whole Quayside project is to try to address some of the really pressing urban challenges that we face, and it's the whole city that faces them as well as the waterfront. One of them is access to affordable housing. This is an increasing problem in Toronto as we grow quickly and real estate prices continue to go up. Finding affordable places to live is a big challenge. For example, there are about 100,000 households on the city's affordable housing wait list, which just indicates the magnitude of the challenge that we're facing. We also find that as we're building new neighborhoods, which is what we're doing in this case, none of the social infrastructure is there, and that's an important thing to build in early because it's something people come to rely on, something people build their lives around. And if they build it around a neighborhood that doesn't have that, they're going other places, and it becomes hard to make that shift back. It's also hard to insert these types of uses into a neighborhood once it's been built. The same goes for parks and public realm. As the downtown has intensified, we're starting to see a shortage of parks and open space. And open spaces are really hard to add to neighborhoods once they have already been built. So we are trying to really plan for those things from the beginning so that we make sure we address these urban challenges from the get-go. And I think with that, I am turning it over to Leslie.
Thanks, Chris. So I'm going to just talk a little bit about the summary of our public feedback to date. So throughout the public engagement process, Waterfront Toronto has received lots of feedback on the project. The following slides illustrate a few examples of areas where there's been support and then areas of consideration presented in previous public consultations. So under supportive feedback, under affordable housing, many participants supported having affordable housing and asked if the amount could be expanded. Under social infrastructure space, there was definitely an interest in more space for social services, however, more clarity was needed. They were very interested in community facilities that are kept open to the public, flexible hours, determined by varying needs and users. Under considerations feedback, family units. Participants expressed concerns about the small unit sizes and said it was important to provide affordable family-sized units. Under public realm, participants expressed some support for innovations, for instance, 3D mapping and GreenWave, that could improve the quality of life and public realm experience for people in the area. However, participants wanted to understand more detail on logistics, mechanics, and implementation of the proposed innovations. So the summary of the consultation feedback is publicly available on the Quayside TO website. So, a summary of our evaluation results. So of the 160 solutions presented by Sidewalk Labs, 69 of them fell within the community, the complete community solutions. And a full list and details of these solutions is included in attachment 2, so the purple area in the discussion guide, and the pages are 7 to 12. So within the 69 complete community solutions, Waterfront Toronto supported 61 of them. And support for certain solutions may change based on feedback from the public, like today, support from Sidewalk Labs, who need to agree with Waterfront Toronto on implementation terms, public policy priorities, and support from governments. Each solution is symbolized with a dot indicating the evaluation results, and a version of this graphic is on page 9 of the discussion guide to see the symbol as it relates to the solutions. Each of these solutions have been categorized within 4 varied degrees of support and 1 of non-support, and we will discuss some examples in more detail. So, a summary of our evaluation results. The evaluation summary results do not mean that Waterfront Toronto has approved moving ahead with the project or into a partnership with Sidewalk Labs. The evaluation results will be used to draft the innovation plan for Quayside. And feedback from this round of consultation will inform our negotiations with Sidewalk Labs about the innovation plan. Oops, sorry. So, one example of a solution we supported was 20% or more affordable housing. So this is an example of a solution that we would support with Waterfront Toronto investment. And I just want to clarify something. When you heard the plenary earlier, they talked about 24%. That extra percentage, it's actually 3.8, but it comes from an obligation that we have on the site that's adjacent to Quayside. And so that will increase the amount of supportive housing that will be affordable housing that we'll be putting on the Quayside site. So when we released the Quayside Innovation Funding Partner request for proposals, we noted our mandate for 20% affordable housing and asked the potential partner to work with us to develop a viable and implementable delivery model for mixed income housing. So in the past, we've participated in the creation of affordable housing and will continue to do so. Traditionally, this has been done by setting aside land sufficient to accommodate the 20% and operated in public or private ownership. Public or nonprofit ownership, for example, in East Bayfront and the West Don lands. In these cases, the city has found funding for the creation of that affordable housing. Sidewalk Labs has proposed to provide 20% of the units as affordable housing defined by the City of Toronto. And that definition comes from the Toronto average market rent by unit type and as stated by CMHC. So, and then 5% of the units on the site will be deeply affordable. So examples of current average market rent for a 1-bedroom today are $1,374 as compared to $2,300 for the average market rent in the city for a 1-bedroom. And for a 2-bedroom, it's $1,591 compared to $2,850. So we're in discussions with the city, the province, CMHC, and Sidewalk Labs to work on the best affordable program we can get and to also explore funding opportunities. Should we move forward, we will continue to ensure that our commitments to affordable housing are met or exceeded, including providing affordable units in perpetuity and also bricks and mortar rather than just land sufficient to set aside. The next solution that we support is, and this is where we would advocate for government funding, is the Care Collective. So it's a dedicated space focused on health and well-being and services similar to a community hub. We have community hubs in Ontario, and they make it easier for residents to access health, social, cultural, recreational, and other resources all together in one location. And this can be in a physical space, or this can be through digital service. So the Care Collective is proposed to be in the Stoah space and on the ground floor. Chris will talk to you about Stoah in a second, which can adapt over time to accommodate the evolving needs of the community. In Quayside, Sidewalk Labs intends to be a catalyst when it comes to promoting health and well-being, not a direct service delivery provider. So Waterfront Toronto has indicated support for the Care Collective and would work with Sidewalk Labs and our government partners to achieve this solution. Chris.
The real-time digital map of the utility network and public infrastructure is another example of a solution that we would support with Waterfront Toronto investment. This technology would enable us to paint a much clearer picture of what is underground serving our city. Today we have maps and databases that are spotty, inconsistent, and we don't always know exactly what's underground. And that means when it's time to add a new utility or time to replace a utility, we end up taking longer than we thought it was going to take, costing more than we thought it was going to take, and disrupting people's lives for a longer period of time than we thought it was going to take. And by building these accurate maps, we can have a much clearer, much more certain picture about what's underground, keep it updated. And with sensing technology, we can combine with these maps the ability to start to understand how the systems are working and start to not only take care of them on a more as-needed basis, but even predict before failures happen that they're coming, which means we can, in theory, prevent a water main from bursting, which when it does that, closes down the street, floods people's basements, causes property damage. If we can predict when that's going to happen and send someone out to repair it before that happens, we can not only reduce costs and reduce insurance claims, but also reduce the inconvenience to people in their daily lives. So we think that this system, in addition to doing that, can start to reduce the burden on the city to maintain some of these increasingly complex utility systems that are being put into the city to make our city more climate positive, to make all of our systems work better. We are adding basically new demands on the city by building the waterfront. There's very little in most of these neighborhoods now. So how do we do it in a way that doesn't create a huge maintenance burden for the city, which is a problem the city faces everywhere, and it's in fact a problem that cities all over the world are facing. Maintenance costs are, in some cases, almost more of an obstacle to building new technology than the initial capital cost. This next one, the Stoah, is an example of a solution that we would support with some regulatory change. The Stoah is a kind of modern reinvention of the ancient Greek Stoa, which was an open marketplace where all the different trade activities of the community took place. You could think of it a bit as a St. Lawrence market, the main difference being that it's a much more diverse set of uses that could be supported here. So this would include things from food preparation, restaurants, to artist studios, to live work spaces, to light manufacturing and maker spaces, all within a very flexible, open plan ground floor space where all the uses can grow and shrink much more real time in relation to market demand. As the demographics of a neighborhood change or the economics change, the ground floors can change over much more quickly and be much more responsive to what the community wants and needs. And so this becomes a mechanism for really increasing the activation, the liveliness of the neighborhood by making sure you've got ground floor uses that are serving people and attracting people. The Stoa is also conceived of as a kind of open, semi-open public space that pedestrians can move through, so it would create more opportunities for people to move through the neighborhood and connect through the blocks. And really, in the end, generate the kind of vibrant street life that we've been hearing people want to see on the waterfront really since we started our work here. The last solution is an example of one that we do not support. This is the outdoor comfort system that includes things that have been called raincoats or awnings. And while we acknowledge that this system certainly helps protect from rain and snow, we haven't seen a demonstration that they really provide much climate benefit beyond that. And at the same time, these structures are very large and are proposed in the public realm, in the public right-of-way, and we are concerned that they actually impede the ability for pedestrians to move through the public right-of-way. And more significantly, we don't see a clear path to these getting approval under the AODA. People who are visually impaired could have a difficult time negotiating their way around these. And so for all of these reasons, this is a solution that we have opted not to support. Now, we don't discount the idea of improved comfort in the public realm, and we would still like to pursue that and find other ways to do it. We simply think there may be other ideas and methods out there that might deliver it in a better way than this one does. So with that, I'm turning it back over to Ian.
Thank you, Chris and Leslie. Again, I'm sure you've already seen these questions a couple of times, but just to remind you, we're, as a starting point for the discussion, keen to understand if you agree or disagree with the conclusions of Waterfront Toronto's evaluation. In this room, we're talking about complete communities, but if there's other ones you want to discuss, that we're open to that as well. If there's solutions that you would like to see Waterfront Toronto prioritize, and if there are any that you're particularly concerned about. And again, if there are other things that you came to talk about, we're definitely open to that as well. So the process that we're planning for the remaining half hour of our time in this room here is going to give at least 20 minutes for you to discuss these questions or other topics that you came to talk about at your tables. Then following those 20 minutes, there's a table facilitator or note taker at each table who will come back and just give us a quick flavor of what you discussed. If we have any time after that, we'll have a couple of questions or comments just in this plenary room before we go back to the big room to hear what the other groups discussed and have a final open conversation. So I'm just gonna ask the facilitators to just raise your hand real quick at each table. Excellent. And Waterfront Toronto staff, if you could raise your hands at each table. So we do have quite a few in the room. They may move around. If there isn't a Waterfront Toronto person at your table and you think you need one, just wave me and I'll come find somebody for you. So I've got just almost about 55 or 56, 356. So at about quarter after, we'll come back for a bit of a report back, and then we'll move to the big room. So just start by introducing yourselves. The facilitators will help, and then we'll just dive right into the discussion. Okay, everybody, so that's been about 20 minutes. Just ask that you wrap up that last point, and we'll start with the report back as soon as the facilitators are ready. Okay, perfect. So Meg's gonna start us off. I'm gonna ask all the facilitators to just get up from your table and come up. And then maybe everybody who's just wrapping up that last conversation can stop. Perfect. Okay, so what we're going to do is each facilitator is going to give 1, 2, maybe 3 highlights of the discussion. It's obviously not going to be able to cover the entirety of your 20 minutes, but hopefully just to give you a flavor of what we talked about. If we have any time after that, we'll have a couple more minutes for points, but we want to make sure that we get you back in the plenary room on time for the final open discussion and report back. So I'm going to start first with Meg here, and let's hear what you talked about.
A lot of positivity at our table about the chance for Toronto to innovate and do something innovative, looking at the example of Barcelona, a chance to learn from trying new things. Also a lot of focus on affordability and making sure that that is baked in to everything. And then the last part around complete communities and the importance of having accessible spaces so that we have good pedestrian neighborhoods and lively retail and life that comes with that.
So we started with an observation from one of our table members that this must be a terrible, a very big challenge for Waterfront to manage this task, but that you noticed the last meeting was very, very philosophical. This one included much more specific solutions, so bravo on that trajectory. Another person particularly interested in green space saw some examples of one idea solving multiple problems and was very encouraged by that. another point. What happens down the road if in 20 years, for instance, Sidewalk ceases to exist as it currently does? What's the plan for Quayside then? So another sidebar for the example of the umbrellas, were they called? Rain and snow at the waterfront, not the biggest problem. It's wind, if you're thinking about alternatives to that one. And then some discussion, some drill down into the concept of inclusivity, which is part of the title of this room, and what does that mean? Some discussion around that area.
Okay, so we spoke about the definitions regarding housing. It's not quite clear, and so are the figures involved there. We spoke a bit about AODA and carbless streets, and we're a bit wary about that for those who are visually impaired. Also regarding the reform over carbless streets. Also, we felt that this plan doesn't adequately address affordable housing, need more housing at a lower price, and yeah.
Our table had very interesting discussions on innovation in the area. We talked about vehicles and cars and like transit on how to get there. We talked about heated pavements, talked about no salt and no plastics, and solar panels on roads. We talked about revisiting the raincoat's intentions to not say no completely, but to encourage other solutions. We liked the real-time mapping of the services, that it was good. We also discussed more affordable housing. We think the 5% deep affordability is kind of minimal. We discussed on like co-living, multi-generational housing, seniors, community care for seniors and servicing for seniors, and discussing how long this will all come together and to build.
In terms of inclusivity, lots of things to do, and that was one of the most concerns. And also in terms of technology, we want a clear definition if the whole community will get a free Wi-Fi, or is it just for affordable houses, that technology. And also we want seniors consideration for sidewalks. Consider seniors for sidewalks.
Okay, so we major points were there should technologies are nice to have, but affordable housing is mandatory. There should be more units, and there's confusion about the number of units. If office headquarters were moved there, will there be fewer units that are affordable? There was support for co-living. Uncertainty about how much open space will be included in this plan for the public, and a strong recommendation not to work with Google because of their the way they anyways, not to work with Google. I'll leave it there.
All right, and the additional reasons for that last point, if the source of those comments want to elaborate, we can do that now a little bit, and or also in the plenary when we go back, because I appreciate that there may be many points that you want to cover, and it's difficult to gloss over everything in a quick report back. We do have a few minutes. If anybody wants to add a point, reinforce a point before we move back to the plenary for the final report back and conversation, now is a good time to do it. Are there any other points that you didn't get heard made at that report back that you'd like to make now? Yes, please. Okay. There's a lot there, but I think from what I've got, at least a couple of the points there was that you've got, your perspective is that Sidewalk and Alphabet are a bad partner if social inclusivity is an objective, given some of the practices of the sister and parent company of Sidewalk Labs. including silencing dissent within their own companies, for example, is one. Okay, thanks. I'll go over there for next one. Yep.
So I'm just quoting from the document, discussion guide, and solving urban challenges. It says Toronto is a thriving city in many ways. However, we're also facing serious challenges like the affordability of housing. It goes on to list other things. But this proposal doesn't really, even in any minor sense, even significant sense, address the issue of affordable housing.
Okay.
And when you look at what, and we talked about our data was reported, but just to emphasize, if 90% of the average market rent,
90%.
and you assume the person has to, they should be paying 1/3 of the rent, and 1/3 of their income in rent, that means you have about a $54,000 a year income, roughly $26 an hour. That's 15% of the affordable housing, so-called, in this development. The rest of the housing prices are going to keep going up. It's going to keep driving up the cost of rent, and so that'll, of course, drive up the 15% as well. So how is this solving the housing crisis?
Right. Right.
Why is this making a suggestion that even attempts to?
Right.
I think it's just really disingenuous.
Right. So I guess, and not to put too fine a point on it, but your response to that first question about whether or not the proposal sufficiently addressed the challenge or raised the bar, you're saying a definite no from your perspective there. Okay. Good. I'll go to the front, and then if we have time, we'll go to the back there. Yep.
I just have a comment and a question.
Okay.
So, really, this is about a project, and I think this is probably one of the best opportunities for Toronto and Ontario to do something innovative in this kind of space. And if one of the largest companies in the world with literally thousands of employees is not a good company, I don't know. But I think we should not kill a project because of things like were mentioned that maybe Google has had some problems. Because who else has stepped up with this kind of a project? I don't think any other company, I think Waterfront chose Google for a reason, or Sidewalk Labs for a reason. They were the only ones to come to the table with something really innovative.
Okay.
On a question, though, I'd like to know what you guys think is the biggest challenge that you've got in this inclusive and affordability space.
That's probably more a question for Waterfront Toronto. If you have an idea, Leslie, maybe you're the person. What do you think the biggest affordability challenge is, if you could name one? Yeah, maybe do you want to just come speak into the mic so that we can capture it, and then this will probably be our last one, and we'll have to go to the other room.
Just quickly, I've spent 30 plus years in the affordable housing sector, and I think that's the biggest challenge for us. High land values, increased construction costs on the waterfront. Like, there are just a number of issues, and it's very, very challenging to build affordable housing in the city. And I applaud all your efforts and support here to try to help us get something good for this.
So high construction costs, land values, or some examples of those.
Yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
So I see 425, and I just got someone at the door wave me over. So we will do our best to report this back, but you will also have a chance to reiterate or reinforce some of these points in the other room. So thank you very much for your time.